In the 80s, cartoons were less about nuanced stories and more about selling action figures. Some, like the Transformers or My Little Pony, would survive well beyond their toy origins. Others, not so much. One of these shows was G.I. Joe, a real American hero. That's the title, I'm not just saying that. It's about what you'd expect. A group of heroes fighting the evil Cobra using a variety of technologies that could be ported to toy form. G.I. Joe fared better than a lot of the cartoons around this time and even got its own major motion picture. But perhaps the most enduring part of the Joe's legacy was the public service announcements and the catchphrase, "Now we know!"
And knowing is half the battle.
You've probably seen the parody dubbings of these if you've been on the internet for a while. I wouldn't be surprised if more people knew about these than knew about the actual PSAs, which is a shame because some of these PSAs are pretty baffling. It's not necessarily their advice, it's mostly solid advice and endorsed by the National Child Safety Council, and most of it matters. What's odd here is context. The Joes pick just about the worst times, places, and people to dispense good advice to, rendering a lot of it worthless. Hey everyone, my name is Tim, and today on Channel Frederator we're listing off the times that knowing wasn't half the battle. Let's get started. Don't call the fire department from a burning building. Let's start off simple. Some kids set their houses on fire while cooking unsupervised.
Mom, know you're cooking? Nope, no one's home but me.
Dang it, number 9, move the curtain before you decide to go all Bobby Flay next time. Doing things unsupervised is going to be a bit of a theme here. Either kids or their parents have some collective problem in the G.I. Joe universe. So our little arsonist shouts, "Call the fire department!" Side note, saying somebody call the fire department doesn't work, but we'll get to that later. Enter Blowtorch with some helpful advice. Don't call the fire department from a burning building because the fire can spread and trap you inside. Goodness, that'd be scary. Instead, you should evacuate and call the fire department from a neighbor's phone. Or, because this isn't the 80s, your cell phone if it's on your person. This is all solid advice. You shouldn't hang around burning buildings. So why is this on the list? Because Blowtorch explains all of this from inside the burning building.
Your first job is to escape immediately.
Go back and watch again. He's monologuing to them standing right in front of the exit. If he was a little more to the right, he'd be actively blocking it. If there isn't time to call the fire department, then there sure as heck isn't time to berate kids on their lack of foresight either. Also, why didn't he tell them to crawl to escape the smoke? Maybe that would have been a good thing to mention. Speaking of, what to do if your house is on fire. So our last bit of advice came from a guy named Blowtorch, which isn't reassuring. So let's get some helpful advice instead from Barbecue.
It's barbecue!
Which isn't better. Although at least the advice here works better in context. 2 kids, in a rare occurrence, don't cause the problem this time. Instead, they wake up to a ton of smoke and fire. The parents could probably use a lesson on the importance of smoke alarms. They try to escape right away, ostensibly acting on the advice of the last PSA, except the door is too hot. Oh no! Enter Barbecue.
Don't go out that door!
Barbecue, for having a ridiculous name, gives solid but incomplete advice. Check the doors for heat, avoid smoke by staying low, find alternate exits. Sounds good. I want to clarify something though. There's a method for checking a door for heat. Namely, you use the back of your hand. Considering the kid burns his palm, this seems like an important thing to reinforce. You use the back of your hand because, in the case of a fire, having access to your hands is essential. If you're going to crawl, open a window, or break something, you're going to need your palms. Fire is hot, and if you were to burn your palms, you wind up in a bad situation. Like I said, the advice here is good, it's just incomplete.
And knowing is half the battle.
In this case, knowing wasn't half the battle, it was like 3/8 of a battle. Anything worth doing is worth planning. Sometimes advice is good, but is trumped by better advice. For example, it's good advice to eat 100 cookies as opposed to 200. It'd be better to eat maybe 1 or 2 cookies, and it's even better to eat none at all. It's important to make sure you're giving the best advice for a situation. So let's look at the advice. Anything worth doing is worth planning. That makes sense. Having a roadmap to success is a phenomenal way to make sure you have everything you need to succeed at whatever you set out to do. That said, that advice loses its effectiveness when we're talking about building an entire treehouse unsupervised, because that's what this kid set out to do.
I built it in 2 days and I didn't even follow any plans.
No parents, no other kids.
Why waste time?
Yes, he should have had a better plan for his treehouse, but more importantly, he should not be allowed around tools. If I were a G.I. Joe, I think at this point I'd go to parents and give them advice about raising a child.
If you don't plan,
You're out on a limb.
How to tread water. By my count, 3 PSAs over the G.I. Joe run deal with water safety. 2 of them are solid. Deep 6 knows his water safety procedures, and he does the right thing by rescuing the drowning kids before giving his lecture. His buddy Torpedo, on the other hand, has some more interesting teaching methods. A kid who does not know how to swim falls off the cliff he was on into the ocean. There's so much wrong with this scenario already that our heroes could get away with just 1 PSA on the virtues of an ounce of prevention versus a pound of cure. People who can't swim shouldn't stand on the very edge of a cliff overlooking the ocean. Nobody should, but especially somebody who can't swim.
Somebody help me!
Fortunately, Torpedo is in the area. Our real American hero decides now is the exact right time to give a treading water lesson.
Use your head, don't lose it!
People drowning aren't in the best position to learn lessons. They're more concerned with, you know, not dying from drowning. In fact, drowning victims are so concerned with basic survival, they're capable of drowning the people trying to save them in an instinctive effort to stay above water. Leave it to a real American hero to teach a bad lesson instead of saving a life. Stop and think before you act. 2 kids are playing in a construction zone when one of them comes to their senses and realizes that maybe this isn't the place to hang out. The other one agrees. It's a rare scene in these PSAs, 2 kids with sense. It doesn't last long. The boy jumps a little trench to leave the house in progress. The girl doesn't think she can make the jump. The boy calls her a chicken.
I can't jump that far. Okay, chicken, I'm leaving you here.
Classy. I want to take a moment to address the elephant in the room. How did they wind up here if this girl can't make this jump? She has to have made it at least once, or there's another way out. Also, the trench is not very deep. She could just climb down it and then climb up the other side. So Lady J arrives and encourages the kids to use their head rather than risk doing something they're uncomfortable with. So she uses a piece of wood to make a bridge across. Lady J revels in a lesson well taught, but that's much worse than the available options. The board is barely longer than the gap, and she has no idea if it's sturdy enough. That's to say nothing of the fact that if she fell off the board, it would have been just as bad or worse than trying to jump the gap. You should stop and think before you act, sure, but you should also try to have good ideas when you stop and think.
That's using your head.
What to do if someone passes out. Oh no, your friend passed out at the mall. This is a scary situation, and doing the wrong thing can make things worse. Airtight's advice, keep them flat, raise their legs, and moisten their forehead with a damp cloth, is a solid foundation for treatment. And lucky for everyone, little Billy, I say little, but in his close-up shots he looks like he's pushing 60. Seriously, how old is this child? Wakes up just fine. There's something missing here though, something I hope was cut out for time. No one calls 911. Losing consciousness isn't something people do apropos of nothing. Something has gone very, very wrong if someone passes out and you don't know why. It could be any number of things, and you should seek immediate medical attention, even if they come back around. They could be in cardiac arrest, in which case you're going to need a little more than a damp cloth and loose clothing.
Now loosen his clothes.
This would have been a good time to share a teachable moment on checking for pulse and breathing, or the proper way to get someone to call 911. Nope, don't worry. Just raise their legs and loosen their shirt. Sorry, Airtight, this isn't half the battle. That's maybe an eighth of the battle, and even then I'm only giving you that much because we see mall security in one shot, and we can hope they were responsible enough to call EMS. Also, way to go, mall visitors. An entire crowd gathers before Billy even hits the ground.
Look at all the people.
No one, not even his friends, try and catch him and soften the landing. I guess it'll come in handy if we ever want to do a concussion PSA. Put reflectors on your bike. 2 punks are riding bikes at dusk and almost get hit by Dusty's car. Nobody could see anyone else because these 2 kids don't have reflectors on their bikes. I'm going to give the 80s the benefit of the doubt and assume that bikes aren't sold with reflectors or that law doesn't mandate them yet. Let's look at the situation here beyond reflectors though. We have 2 intersecting streets, no clear stop signs or suggestions of who yields to who. Dusty is at least as much his fault as these 2 kids. If you're on unfamiliar roads, you shouldn't be approaching an intersection at full speed. Also, if anyone had stopped to look both ways, this would have gone a lot better. Dusty had his lights on after all. His car would be more than visible. Also, neither of these kids wear helmets, and nobody says a word about it.
A helmet? What are you, some kind of wimp?
They have a whole PSA about how helmets are important, and it just goes straight out the window here.
Now we know.
And finally, listen to yourself. So we just went over that some of these kids are stupid enough to try building a treehouse or making unstable bridges while trespassing in construction zones. I think that if the Joes didn't exist, we'd find that a lot of these kids would perish. That's why Flint's advice to listen to yourself doesn't hit home for me.
What are you, a sissy? Prove you're not or we'll tell everybody.
Young Bob doesn't want to vandalize a park and his friends peer pressure him. Flint arrives to tell Bob to listen to himself, because only you know what's best for you.
I knew I was right because I know what's best for me.
I'm sorry, these kids do not know what is best for them. They shouldn't listen to themselves or anyone. I'm not sure anyone in this universe other than the Joes can keep these kids in line. For all the good it will do, Flint might as well hand these kids a cup of bleach and tell them to drink up.
Right on.
Thanks for watching bad G.I. Joe advice that ensured that knowing wasn't half the battle. If you enjoyed this video, you might also enjoy our video on lessons the Magic School Bus taught you that are wrong, or our video on times cartoons have been censored. You can go ahead and check those out on the annotations, click those whenever. Be sure to subscribe to Channel Frederator for more videos about your favorite cartoons, and remember, Frederator loves you.